Hey everybody, welcome back for another video. I do apologize. I know it's been a couple of weeks since I've put out any new videos, but if I'm being honest, I've had a lot going on in my personal life that just hasn't really left me in the mood to record. And also, as you're about to find out, I have been very, very busy reading. I didn't even know it was coming, but I read a ton of books this month. So let's get right into it and let me recap everything I read for you. So the first thing I want to talk about is a little bit of a carryover from August because I started at the tail end of August. But that was my reread of A Clash of Kings, which is of course book 2 of A Song of Ice and Fire. And what can I say? I absolutely loved it. Like I said, this is a reread for me. This is the third time I've read this book, but the first time I've read it from this really beautiful illustrated edition. Can't say enough about these. Pick them up if you have the opportunity because they are really impressive. I've really enjoyed reading out of these. I was recently on iWizard, Jordan's channel, and I talked with Mike and Jordan, and we did a full spoiler chat and breakdown of A Clash of Kings. And Jordan is always great at asking very insightful questions that kind of get you thinking and are a little bit outside of the box. So if that's interesting to you, definitely check it out because that was a very, very fun conversation. And like I said, this is a reread. My favorite series, my favorite fantasy world. What else can I say? It's so, so good. I loved Clash of Kings. Jordan asked us to rank them, and it's just so hard for me because I just love, especially these first 3 books are just, they're about perfect. So if you've never read A Song of Ice and Fire, don't let any of the reputation surrounding the series about, there's a TV series and it was popular and then it wasn't. And is George going to finish the books? These are all valid questions. I get it. But don't let it stop you from reading the series because what we have right now is still a masterpiece and it's my favorite for a reason. So don't hold back on A Song of Ice and Fire. Definitely read it. The next book I finished in September was Cujo by Stephen King. I was kind of looking for something short to fit in between what I had finished and the next book I'm about to talk about. And this book is pretty small. And I knew it because of the movie reputation, but it doesn't seem like a lot of Stephen King book fans talk much about Cujo. So I wanted to read it for myself, figure out why. And I'm very, very, very glad I read it because I loved it. I thought it was hella scary, like maybe the scariest Stephen King book I've ever read. And I'm going to say that with an asterisk because there's lots of different types of fear and scary, right? So yeah, as far as just like sitting on the edge of your seat and being like, oh my God, like what's going to happen? There's so much tension. I'm so scared. Like as a mom, as it was good, you guys. So there are a lot of side stories with characters that are just kind of like building up the entire situation and everything that plays into that iconic scene in the car with the dog. So it isn't just about the car and the dog, and that does throw some people off, I think. But for me, I just think no one else does a peek into the human psyche better than Stephen King, and this is a great example of that. So pick this up if you haven't read it and you're already a Stephen King fan because I thought it was so good, and I think more people should be reading it. One of my most anticipated reads for the month of September was The Blackest Heart by Brian Lee Durfee. A bunch of us are rereading and several are reading for the first time the 5 Warrior Angel series. It's a trilogy. The 3rd one is coming out in November, so we're kind of like recapping and building up some excitement for that release of the final book in November. So I read book 2 in September. I reread it. And I remembered why I love this book so much. It is metal, you guys. It is wild. There is a battle scene towards the end of this book that is still one of the craziest things I've ever read. Check out that series. I know I've been hyping it for several months now, but with due cause. I think it's really excellent and totally underrated. So if you're looking for something that is fantasy, that has impressive world building and religions and lore and mystery and all kinds of plot twists and detours and oh my gosh, prophecies, like it has all the stuff I love, but it's also very grimdark and it's violent and it's gross in times, but it's funny. Like, you've got to check this series out because I think it's unique and it's honestly not like anything else I've ever read in fantasy. So I've said it 100 times, but I think these books are underrated. So definitely check them out because there's plenty of time to get caught up before the final book comes out in the very end of November. Also in September, I continued with my read through of Codex Solera. I read book 5. I was going to try to read 5 and 6 to wrap it up because that was the original plan, was $2 a month. But my library hold for the final book, I'm still waiting on it because I am doing these both audio and with my eyes when I have a chance. And I'm still just kind of mixed on this series in general. I kind of had a breakdown, a little spiel on Discord the other day where I was just like, I'm not sure why it's not clicking. Because if I go through and list all the things I like, there's a lot I like about this series. I actually really enjoy the main character, which is sometimes a miss with me. I think the cultures are really, really unique and rich. There's a lot of really great action sequences. They're well paced. And so I'm sitting there going, I feel like it's a little bit of a miss for me. Like I'm not loving it like I want to, but I can't figure out why. So I think right now I'm at like a 3.5 out of 5. You know, so like that's not a bad rating, but I can't quite make it something I love. So I'm hoping that the final book will really wrap things up and be satisfying for me. But as of right now, I'm about a 3.5 overall. I do think that my experience has improved since the beginning, but just not quite enough to like push it into that series of like, is this going to be on my top 10 for the year? Is it going to be, you know, something I just recommend as like a blanket recommendation to people? Like probably not. But am I enjoying myself? Am I glad I read it? Is it something that I think is cool and worthwhile? Yes, I'm still in that camp. I don't have a physical copy of it because I read it on my Kindle, but I, for the first time this month, read Fahrenheit 451. And it's very weird to me to be 36 years old and just now reading Fahrenheit 451 for the first time, especially as someone who loves books, who is a proponent of freedom and all that kind of stuff. It's definitely something that I should have read by now. But I read it and I thought it was incredible. I'd love to have conversations with people about this book, but I'm sure it's been discussed and broken down to death by now. But absolutely brilliant, and I loved it. And I can see myself reading it many more times and recommending it to tons of people. So I doubt you haven't read it yet because it seems like most people have. But if you haven't read it yet, definitely check it out. It's pretty short. I read it in, I think, 2 settings, and I really enjoyed it, but it also did get the wheels turning and kind of made me think about some stuff. And sometimes it's great to have a book that really gets the old thinker going. Okay, guys, I actually went and did something kind of crazy, and I wasn't planning on doing this, but I read all 4 of the Robin Hobb Rain Wild Chronicle books in September. You know me, I love my Robin Hobb. I always planned on reading all of the Realm of the Elderlings at some point in this year, finishing them up by the end of the year. But then I was in the Robin Hobb channel, the discussion channel in Mike's Discord, and I saw that a couple of friends were going to be reading the Fitz and the Fool trilogy. You can see it right behind me. They're going to be reading them together in what is next month, October. And I got kind of jealous, maybe not jealous, but I mean, when you read something like that, it's kind of the culmination of something huge. I was like, that's going to be more fun to read it with friends. And so I was just like, hey, do you guys have room for more? I would love to read that with you. And of course they were like, absolutely, that'd be so fun. We'll wait for you if you want us to. But I could tell they didn't want to wait. Like they were definitely really looking forward to getting to those big books back there. And so I thought, okay, I only have like 2 weeks. But I wonder if I could read all 4 of those Rain Wilds books in time to jump along and buddy read Fitz and the Fool with these guys. So I let them know. I was like, here's the thing. I'm going to plan on trying to get through these. But I don't want to burn out. I don't want to hate read these. I don't want to get to the point where I'm just like doing it to get to, you know, point A to point B. And so they were so accommodating and friendly and welcoming. And they're just like, take your time. We would rather have you with us than, you know, have you read it solo. It'll be more fun to talk about it all together. And so I had that comfort and that freedom knowing that like I didn't have to read them all by October 1st or be left behind. But luckily, I actually really ended up enjoying these, and reading all 4 of them in 2 weeks was no problem. It does help a lot that I was able to have lots of audiobook time this month. I worked extra. We had some road trips. So my audiobook time was maximum. But then I also had 2 whole weekends this month where I really was able to just kind of like lay around with the family and read a whole bunch. And so as you're about to see through this list and me naming things, I actually read 11 books this month, and some of them were huge. So that is not typical. That probably won't happen again for several months. but it just lended itself really well to me being able to finish up the Rainwild Chronicles. Now, these books are not that big. Like, the biggest one is the final one, and I think it's maybe 550 pages or something. 520 pages. And that sounds crazy, but like, do you see how it is? Like, the font isn't tiny. There's these wide margins and stuff. So they are not really big books. So that helped a lot. But I was kind of led to believe, and again, maybe I'm projecting some, but I thought that most Realm of the Elderling and Robin Hobb fans were like, oh, it's so excellent, but Rainwild is trash. Like, that's kind of, maybe it's not what anybody actually said to me, but for some reason that was the vibe I got. That people were just like, ugh, those Rainwild's books are the worst. And I was preparing myself to just buckle down and read. I liked him a lot. I don't know what to tell you. I liked him a lot. There is one of my least favorite tropes that kind of takes place in this series, and I'll just go and tell you, it's love triangle. I don't like it. But it was a pretty small aspect in the grand scheme of things. I really liked all the other POVs. I loved getting a deep dive into dragon culture, and I loved seeing the big picture unfold right before my eyes. Like, seeing everything set up, everything that, because I mean, up until now, it's fair to say that it's kind of a disjointed series. Like, the Realm of the Elderlings, that's what makes it so great. But it also is kind of disjointed. It's nice because it's 17 books. That's a lot of books. So no one wants to tell you it's 17 books. So instead, it's like, oh, it's Farseer. That's 3 books. It's a trilogy. Then Live Ship Traders. It's 3 books. It's a trilogy. Don't even worry about it. Rainwild Chronicles, just 4 small books. Don't even worry about it. Fits in the Fool, just another 3, okay? So taking them in small chunks is so digestible. But it's like Farseer and Tawny Man, like, they kind of go together. And Live Ship and Rainwild, they kind of go together. And I can see now what she's building because it's all being tied together very deliciously for this final trilogy. So I was really, really happy that I was able to catch up with these. But more than anything, I was really happy that I didn't hate them. I liked them quite a bit. And the last thing I read in all of September was something I've been looking forward to for quite a while now, and that was The Winners by Frederick Backman. So I have loved everything I've read by this author, and this is the final book of the Beartown trilogy. So I read Beartown last year, and I don't know how to say this without sounding corny or cheesy, but it stole my heart. It is a beautiful and heartbreaking story that will crush your soul, but make you feel more alive. Like, I know that sounds insane, but that book was just a masterpiece. And after I finished it, I heard that there was another book. It's called Us Against You, and that there was a third one coming. And I thought, that's so weird. Like, I didn't feel like Beartown needed a sequel. I didn't feel like it was a story that had more in it. But I was wrong. Us Against You book 2 was also absolutely phenomenal. And then The Winners was just a masterpiece as well. I don't have it in front of me. I've ordered it, but it says it's not coming till like October 5th. So I'm going to be happy to have it on my shelf. I'm sure I will reread these at some point. But I did the whole thing on audio. Marin Ireland is the narrator, and she is amazing. So I really enjoyed the audiobook experience. But I do want that book on my shelf. So I'll be happy when it gets here. But guys, if you haven't read any Backman, I still think I would probably recommend starting with A Man Called Uva. Just because it's one book, it's all by itself, and I think it's basically perfect. I love that book. But you can't go wrong with Beartown either. So if you are wanting to step out of some genre fiction and read something that's just a regular book, as I say sometimes, I can't recommend Backman enough. He does something really, really special. And it's funny because the only other person I think who does it better than him is Stephen King. Now, Stephen King and Frederick Backman, it would be easy to say that they have nothing in common because their books aren't alike at all. But the way he writes dialogue, the way he writes human authenticity, the way he writes a town and a community and makes them feel like a character in themselves, the way he builds tension, the way he writes dynamic and realistic interactions between kids, no one else does it better than Frederick Backman except for Stephen King. So I think it is kind of safe to say, in a weird way, that Stephen King fans are going to really enjoy and appreciate Frederick Backman. Even though the types of literature are very, very different from each other, the writing style and the writing quality and that extra special bit of magic they can put into something, they have it in common. So I don't know, if you've read both, tell me if I'm way off, because it's a strange comparison to make, because they don't have a lot in common, but in some level they have like everything in common. As far as book of the month goes, I'm looking at my list right now. I'm not going to count any rereads, because that just makes it easier for me, so I don't have to consider A Clash of Kings or The Blackest Hearts, which are totally book of the month quality books. Honestly, Blood of Dragons, book 4 of Rainwild Chronicles, was very, very good and is book of the month quality. But for me, it's definitely going to be The Winners. The Winners was 5 stars, easily. A beautiful, beautiful final installation for that Beartown series that is just so special to me. It touched on every emotion. Like, when I say I sobbed, I mean, I was like boo-hooing. But in the end, like I said earlier, I felt alive. Like, it's just a beautiful book. So, huge recommendation for me. Definitely book of the month. But really, I was pleasantly surprised by everything I read. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you had a spectacular September.